Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the difference between changing focal length and physically moving with our feet, or however you want to move, right? Don't want to make people who are not using their feet feel left out. I've switched from a fixed focal length lens, right? This is a 50 millimeter lens. It does not zoom in or out, right? The only option with this is to take a lens off and put a new focal length lens on. Um, that's how you would change focal length, or you can move with your feet, or however, and get closer or farther away. So this is a zoom lens, and it means that I can change focal length just by twirling this little dial on here. So if I take a picture that is at 24 millimeters, and if I zoom in, that is at 105 millimeters. So we often think of it just as getting sort of quote unquote closer when we take a picture like that, but there is actually a significant difference between changing the focal length of our lens, right? So staying in the same position, right? Take a wide angle picture versus a close-up picture. Standing in my own shot here. Let's go over here a little bit to the side. We'll see some other goofiness that we can photograph. All right, wide angle picture and close-up picture. Right, you can now see what a total mess this place that I'm photographing in is. So that's zooming in. That is going to give me a different look compared to, say, moving with my feet and taking a second picture. Now, to show you that, I've actually set up some shots that are not quite so dumb looking, and I'm going to roll through those. So this is back in the PDF. So I've set up a scene here and shot of the room using a wide angle lens, right? This is 24 millimeter on there. And you can see there are various objects in there, right? They have sort of like particular relationships between them visually as we look at them in the scene. And now I've gone from that 24 millimeter to a 50 millimeter. And in this one, right, so these are two images. The one on this side, I've changed my focal length, right? So I've gone from that 24 millimeter original to a 50 millimeter focal length. And that has, again, right, it's like I'm using a smaller piece of that image, cropping in a little bit. And on the other image, so that one over there, I've just taken that original 24 millimeter shot and gone into Photoshop and cropped into the center. Right, so one, I've changed the lens, kept the camera in the same position. One, I have just gone in there in Photoshop and cropped in on all four sides. And they look identical, right? Can we tell which is which? No, not really. You can go ahead and take a moment to look at them. So when I change focal length, again, it's like I'm just taking the same exact picture and only looking at a smaller portion of it, right? So cropping in and using a longer focal length are going to give me visually identical results, right? Assuming I'm not changing my camera position, stay in the same place. This is, what happens when you use a crummy point and shoot that has a super zoom, right? That's not an optical zoom. It's really just sort of cropping in and cropping in and cropping in. The problem, of course, with cropping in is that if you crop in too much, you're going to lose some image quality because you're going to be blowing your image up a lot. But the takeaway from this is that when I change focal length, right, when I go to a longer focal length lens, the relationships between objects in my frame does not change. It is exactly like the initial picture was, right? So that, like, you know, thing is like right on top of the camera. The sort of doll's head, right, is, sorry, can't point, is where it is. This freaky mask of myself is right on the edge of the frame. There's sort of a nice relationship between the flowers and the pillow, yada, yada, yada. So change my focal length doesn't affect my composition. Now, what if I move with my feet? Okay, so here we are, we're back again. There's that same 24mm shot that we had in the first picture. And now, right, I've gone from, this is my 50mm shot, right? Again, the relationships of things within the frame does not change. Doesn't change. Does it change? No, it doesn't change. And then in this shot, I have physically moved closer. So I kept that 24mm lens and I just moved myself closer to the subject, right? So if we look at both of these, the doll in the middle, right, that's my subject, is essentially the same size in both of them, right? But the framing of the rest of the picture is super, super different. The flowers are gone entirely, right? I've moved closer and they are sort of like out of my frame. The sort of relationship of the weird little forensic thing and the camera has changed. The sort of table is gone. This dinosaur is gone. What the picture looks like is completely different. And that's what happens when you physically move. When you physically move, the perspective, the relationship of the objects around you also changes, right? Sometimes, oftentimes, this is good, right? If I have something that's in my shot, and I'm like, oh, I want to get that out of my shot. I can't just zoom in, but if I move closer, right, then that thing is now, say, behind me, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So physically moving your feet will change the perspective that you have on those objects. Changing your focal length, zooming in, will not, right? The only time perspective changes is when you move your camera. So that's super important. You can go through the PDF. There are a bunch of sort of, more pictures demonstrating this even more vigorously. So that was not a, I'm going to punch you. That was like, yeah. I want people to be like, I don't know. I started talking about cameras and he was like coming after me. So take a look at that. Be aware of it. Move with your feet. Change its perspective. Zooming in does not change perspective. It just sort of magnifies the part of the image that you were looking at. All right, cool.